What's up guys, and welcome back to another Pokemon Sun and Moon video. And today what we are going to do is, since the middle starter evolutions were revealed yesterday, it seems only fitting that we actually revisit the Chinese leak, or the leaked final starter evolutions, and actually compare them, I suppose, to the middle evolutions and see if they're still, I guess, viable in a sense, because of course beforehand we just had the final evolutions and the starters. And as we see with fan art out there, they could almost be anything, you know, between from starter stage to from base stage up to final evolution. You could change a load of stuff and you wouldn't really be able to say, you know, oh, this couldn't happen. Like you could see Griffin for Rowlet really if it evolved in a certain way. But now that we actually have the middle evolutions to go alongside this, to sort of bridge the gap, we can actually look at those designs and see if maybe the split over is actually a viable step, I suppose. Because of course, if you know, Rowlet's evolution, instead of going into, you know, a humanoid like it has with Dartrix, if it turned into a four-legged creature, then of course it would be a bit weird for it to go back to a bipedal Pokemon for its final evolution. But of course it doesn't do that, so we can sort of link these things together basically. So we're going to go through line by line and sort of cross over between the two or three Pokemon in total and see what the similarities are there. Of course, there could be similarities because, of course, design is just pretty good. Like, obviously, some similarities are inherent from Rowlet all the way up to the final evolution because, of course, claws, very similar, very basic. And, of course, you can just assume certain tendencies go along, but we can have a look regardless. So, starting off with the Rowlet line, of course, and what do we have? Well, obviously, if you look at them, they look fairly similar. I mean, of course, you can't really see. Robin Root, I'm going to call it. Not necessarily its final name, but Robin Root was the one that the community has denoted for this fate, or for this possible final evolution. Robin Root, you can't see its face, of course, so we don't really know whether or not it could be similar in that aspect, but we can look at some other things. First up, we have its hair, or the head apparel, basically. Obviously Rowlet hasn't got any, but Dartrix indeed does have this sort of tuft of fur, hair, feathers hanging down across over the side of its right eye, and of course Robin Root has this hood across its head. Now this isn't a huge link of course, but you could say headwear is increasing, you know, it's gone from this loop over and then imagine the other one coming over, and eventually you've got yourself a hood of the feathers coming around across the face, so you could put a link in there. Following after that, claws, as I've already mentioned, starting with Rowlet, moving through to Dartrix, and obviously finally onto Robin Root. The claw shape is almost exactly the same, you know, two claws at the front and one at the back, so it's not like the final evolution for, you know, this art has got, you know, only two claws or three claws just facing forwards. It matches Dartrix, and of course it would be weird for the claws to sort of change that way. Moving further on though, we have, this is actually a really tight one, which is the fact that Robin Root's design, you can see here, he is using his feathers to shoot an arrow. And you can see both the arrow there, as well as these triangles on the inside of its wing. And if we look at Dartrix, you can see it has similar sort of style with its, you know, green feathers, as well as these orange feathers just inside it, orange triangles almost. Now this links in with the backstory for Dartrix, of course, being able to throw, you know, sort of really sharp feathers, similar to knives. And we have throwing knives, and then we have arrows with Robin Root. So the suitable or the expected transition from knives would be going up to a proper bow and arrow. So it seems like that could be the way that it's going to go there in the end, of course. We don't know, it's just an observation. Moving on further, then we have the bow tie. Obviously Rowlet has one, then Dartrix has one as well. It's wilted a bit, I would say, or, you know, dropped down a bit. And then Robin Root's, you can't see it in this image of it, but it also has its bow tie sort of collapsed out and it's opened up, so you can see it's sort of hanging off. But you can also see this orange just decoration on the centre of it, which is almost like an open bow tie, and the bow tie actually is hanging down as on strings basically. So it's opening up as it goes along the evolution line, it seems. And then looking at the lower half of each body, you can see in Rowlet we have the claws and then a white lower half with a brown, you know, upper body, basically brown feathers. Looking at Dartrix, you can see this white upper body, you know, sort of still stays there, but its wings also turn white as well. But going back to this Robin Root design, its wings go to brown. Now, whether this is a point against it, I wouldn't necessarily say so, since you obviously can switch things in and out. With evolution lines in the past, we've seen colours switch back and forth as you got the evolution line, but you can also see that the white design has travelled all the way up, it's staying on its legs as well as its lower body, or even upper body, I guess you could say, apart from the shroud it's wearing. So it's a similar thing along the line still, even though the wing colour is different. And then finally, we also have something that, again, I think really sort of clinches it for me and actually makes me believe the Robin route even more. And it's, if we look at Dartrix, there's a right wing which you can see 2 spots on that wing. And if we look further at Robin route's design, you can see on the, again, we have the right wing visible, and you can see 3 spots there. Now, of course, spots are a fairly simple thing, you can easily put them on, but I don't know, to me it just seems like, okay, why would you put spots on it? Rowlet's got no spots, so why would you put spots on the wings of Robin route, unless of course Dartrix had them and carried them up. So there's that there. That's something else that I think really clinches it, as well as of course the knife throwing and the bow and arrow shooting. We'll move on now to the second Pokemon, or second evolution line, which is Litten, Torracat, and this Pokemon, I'm going to call it, what's the name of it? Beltigre. Beltigre is the one the community do like for this sometimes. There's a lot of common stuff here as well. The first of these is that if we look at the top of Litten's head, you can see this pattern which looks similar. We've talked about an Alchemy Fairy. If you look at Torracat, you can see the pattern stays very similarly on its forehead, also it's sort of incorporating as part of its eyebrows, but it's also present on its back. You can see on the back of its back. And if we look at the final evolution, which is Beltigre, as I said, you can see the pattern is still visible on its head, although a little shorter on the sort of the top line, which is sort of similar. If you go along the line, you can see Litten has a fairly wide one, gets a bit shorter for Torracat, and then even shorter for Beltigre, and you can see the eyebrows have sort of gone a bit longer. It's also present on its body. This time on the front of its body, you can see it's a black star rather than an orange one, but it's very similar nonetheless, sitting right there. So possibly, obviously they could have easily grabbed the marking from Litten and put it on the final evolution, but it being on the head still for Torracat and also on its body now does sort of pull it all together a bit more. Moving on further, then we have the tail, which is actually quite an interesting one. Looking at Litten's tail, it's an interesting tail because it goes out and then there's the tuft of fur at the end. Then at Torracat, the fur comes out a bit more and expands a bit more, and then finally for Beltigre, you can see here, this black fur has expanded into sort of like a circle, almost like a collar, and you have the actual tail moving a bit further, so it's almost like the tail is punching through the end, and you have a sort of explosion of tail. I don't think that's the best way to describe it, but that's what I'm looking at there. Moving on further then, we have the tufts of hair on the lower of its face. You can see Litten has 2 coming off, etc. Torracat expands this by making them a bit straighter, but you can see instead of just having this single tufts, they sort of expand out into a few more. It's got 2 to the side and 1 down each side of its face. And looking at Beltigre, you can see the red fur around its face is actually moustache basically. It's coming around its face, again like a collar sort of thing, which again, so its facial hair is getting bigger the further along the line we go. Then we also have this new bell that Torracat has gotten on its neck, which is its flame sack, and you can see on Beltigre you have this orangey yellow belt around it, hence Beltigre. This could easily be a transition of the flame sack. We know this bell on Torracat's neck is its flame sack, looked to be obviously like a bell on a cat's collar sort of thing, and then it could transition to be the flame sack for Beltigre could be its belt, and that could be how it fits in Beltigre. Its belt makes a lot of sense there. So that's another link there in. Obviously, Litten doesn't have one of those, so it's a bit of an interesting one. It's come up. There's a very small one here. You can see in Litten's ears, they're on the insides of the ears, they are almost all grey on the inside. Looking at Torracat, you can see it's a smaller area inside. There are only 2 small bits of grey. And looking at the very small ears of Beltigre, you can see no grey at all. It's a very small detail, but it's possible that could link in and make it more similar. Then looking at their legs, you can see Litten has a black paw with red and black then going up its leg, whereas Torracat has an orange paw, orange/red, pretty much substitutable, orange and then black and orange stripes. And then looking at Beltigre's lower and also upper lower legs and arms, you can see red paw similar to Torracat's and then black stripes there. Obviously you can't necessarily say this is something that makes them more similar, but it is similar to Torracat at least. Then after this we have also looking at the paws, the front paws of Litten, Torracat and Beltigre. You can see Litten's are very small and dainty, there's nothing too much there. Torracat actually gains some claws on its front feet but no claws on its back feet. And then if we compare it to Beltigre, you can see Beltigre obviously has these huge big paws, getting bigger as we go along the line with some long claws. And of course there are no claws on its lower legs, possibly hinting that Torracat already is becoming a bit more of a bipedal Pokemon, not having claws on its back legs, because it's not going to be quadruped, for example. So that's the Linen line there. And then finally, of course, we have the Papio line, which is not as many sort of comparisons because it's a fairly simple line. But we'll start off first with its nose, because if you all got noses, of course, you could grab Papio's nose and put it on your Entermaid is the name of this one apparently. So there's that. Moving on further, this is a really cool one. If we look at Brion's sort of antenna almost, you can see they are sticking up from top of his head. There's two of them, and they have almost like pearls on the end. And then if we look at Entermaid's hair as such, you can see it's actually wrapped up in pearls, obviously coming off the end of his head. So it seems like, if this is obviously real, the pearls, go from the antenna and move up on and turn into like a hair scrunchie, which is pretty cool and not something you would have thought of from Papio. Moving on then, obviously we have loads of frills for this line. Papio has a frill around its neck. Brion has loads of frills around its main sort of middle body, and then of course Entermaid has a frill on the end of its tail, and as well as this frills on its main body. Now, whether this confirms it or not, because of course Papio has a frill, we don't know, but yes, of course it doesn't confirm it, but you get the idea. Then looking at Brion's and Entermaid's eyes, you can see Brion, as well as having a normal eye, an addition of basically makeup on this eye. You can see this black line across the top with these two spikes, just to highlight the eye. And looking at Entermaid, it has a very similar sort of thing there around its eye, bit of highlight to it almost. So that's possibly another link in there. And then finally, looking at the fins for these three, you can see Papio's fins are blue, as is most of its body, blue with two white bits on it, and fairly similar shape to Brion's, except Brion's, instead of having just the white sort of white lines, the whole of the end of the fin is white. And then comparing that to Entermaid, you can see the whiteness, if I can call it that, has gone all the way up its fin or its arm, including its main body now. So it's almost like the white section of the body is moving further up as the evolution line goes on. But of course, now the sort of comparisons for all the lines there. Let me know down below if you think does it sort of convince you more that they are actually real, they're real evolutions and they've been leaked really early, or you're still not quite convinced there are some things that don't match that did you expect Litten's evolution to go on 2 feet, for example? Let me know what you think about it down below. But if it does confirm for you and you really think that they are real, do let me know that as well. But for now, that's something for me for today, so if you enjoyed the video, be sure to hit the like button down below. I'll be seeing you next time. Thank you for watching. Goodbye, my friends.